Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam. September is over, so that means we obviously have to wrap up what I read in that month. I read 5 books in September, which is kind of higher numbers than usual, or at least my kind of highest in general, but they were generally smaller books, so that's probably why. I read some that I've been meaning to read for a long time, plus 2 off my massive challenge of reading all the Sci-Fi Masterworks books, so I'm very happy with that. As always, I will give you my brief thoughts on those books, plus my October TBR. So with that and much further ado, let's talk about the month of September. So I kicked off the month with Eon by Greg Bear, my first ever Greg Bear story and one of the Sci-Fi Masterworks I was talking about. This was a buddy read with my good friends Bart and Whitney, and this time we had the brilliant Richard from Vintage SF, as well as a wonderful viewer called Dale along for the ride. So that was really good fun, reading along with such good people, as it always is. So this story, it starts as this kind of big dumb object story. So we have an asteroid that enters into Earth's orbit, quite a large asteroid. And we kind of have no messing around when it comes to this story. We go straight into the plot. So after the initial finding of this asteroid, we jump forward a few years with the asteroid having been partially explored, and it looks like there is habitation on there, or there has been habitation on there, because there are cities that have been abandoned, and there is a mysterious chamber at the end of the asteroid that we need to find out about later in the book, which I won't talk about for spoilers. And what we do is we send a young and talented mathematician up to explore further and gain understanding on a problem that could have catastrophic effects on the whole world. We also have this kind of side plot of a Cold War plot, where the Russians haven't been given full access to the asteroid and will do anything to get their hands on this asteroid and the mysteries that are there within. Now, I can't say much more than that about the plot, but suffice to say that this book covers a lot of ground and goes in many different directions that you may not be expecting. But this is where I think this book kind of falters for me. It feels like Bear didn't really know where he wanted to go with the story, and it just feels quite messy. None of the ideas are kind of fully realized, with many points feeling that like they were just kind of left behind. If he had maybe stuck to 2 or 3 of the storylines and shortened the book a little bit, I think it could have been absolutely brilliant. In particular, for example, the Cold War plot feels like it was kind of just put there out of necessity because of the times. This was written in 1985, I believe. So, you know, the Cold War is still going on, tensions are still high, and it was very common for writers to write Cold War plots into their sci-fi at the time. So it didn't really feel like it added a lot, and the way it was done was very unsubtle, shall we say, as well. It was very kind of an American point of view on this kind of Cold War situation. As for the prose, it was very functional, easily digestible, with some kind of scientific leanings and lingo at times when he wanted to describe things that he clearly had a lot of passion for. I believe he was a scientist himself. The pace was fairly fast, and it feels like, you know, one of those kind of books that is like a descendant of a pulp fiction from, you know, the back in the day of those kind of sci-fi stuff. Maybe you could call this an airport read or a beach book, that kind of thing. Quite easy to digest, or as Whitney calls it, a dad book, which I love that phrase. This is typified by some kind of really awfully cringy sex scenes and possible wish fulfillment in there. So overall, this wasn't a bad book, but it wasn't a great book either. I'm very glad to have read it, and I will try more Bear in the future, and not just because he has one more on that SF Masterworks list, but he has a few books that I'm interested in. This was quite early in his career, so I'm very interested to see where he went with his writing in his career. The buddy read, we did have kind of a live stream and a discussion. The live stream is quite long, where we go through like a bunch of games and just kind of general chit chat, but we do talk about the book as well at the end of the stream. So I will put a link in the description for that if you want to find out our thoughts as a kind of a buddy read and how we enjoyed the buddy reads and our thoughts on the book. So that was Eon by Greg Bear. The next book I read was A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. So I have finally finished all of Ishiguro's repertoire. I finished his repertoire by reading his first book last, but I have now finished everything he has read, and I'll say straight off the bat that this is one of my favorites of his. Not at the top, but very, very near. After really disliking The Unconsoled, which I read last month, this was back to Ishiguro at his very best. So this story follows a Japanese lady called Etsuoko. Wow, the sun is really coming out. We have two storylines. We have the present day living in the UK as an immigrant, and flashbacks to when she was pregnant with her first child, living in Nagasaki, Japan, in the wake of the nuclear bomb. There's not much more to say in terms of plot or story, as this is absolutely not a plot-focused book, absolutely no way. This is all about themes and emotions. And also, this is about Etsuoko's memories of a friendship that is triggered by her young daughter coming to visit her in the present. This is an extremely subtle book that says a lot in very few words, which is typical of Ishiguro's style. And he puts a lot of kind of contextual clues into his prose, which is kind of typified by Japanese culture and their way of having contextual conversations where reading between the lines is very important. And you get a lot of this kind of dialogue in those sections in the Japan flashbacks. In such a short book, Ishiguro definitely explores many themes in a very emotionally impactful way. The theme that stood out to me personally was that of grief. Grief of losing your child, as we learn early on that she has lost her first child later in life. He does this through a mirroring effect, where present-day Etsuoko is looking back at her friend in the past in Japan, who she is learning that she has more in common with than she initially thought. There is also a wonderful literary technique to explore this theme of fuzzy memory blurring the lines of reality, which is used to a really, really powerful degree. There's one of the best paragraphs I have ever read in which it does this towards the end of the book, which kind of just caps off this fuzzy memory exploration and turns everything on its head and made me just want to go back to the start and read again and pick up on all the subtle clues that he has put in throughout the book up until that point. Another big theme is of dislocation and, you know, exploring your national identity. This is explored both in the present day as her being an immigrant in the UK, but also in relation to Japan's place in history following World War II and the devastating effects that had on their society and how they were kind of reintegrating into the world after this. Another exploration is that of the role of women and the shifting attitudes towards this in Japan following the war. That's about all I've got to say on this book at this point. It was a masterpiece of subtle emotional writing and one of my books of the year. I will also make a note that seeing as I have finished everything that Ishiguro has written, I've made kind of a summary video of all of his works where you may be able to start with his works and then a ranking of, all 9 books that he's written from 9 to 1. So I'll pop a link in the description for that if you want to learn more about Ishiguro and what I feel about him. So that was A Pale View of Hills. Please excuse the lighting. I generally use natural light. I had to record early out of necessity. The angle of the sun is just really being a nuisance and it keeps going in and out of the clouds. So please bear with me. So the next book I read was The Long Walk by Stephen King, writing as Richard Bachman. I read it from this wonderful collection of Richard Bachman stories. Not really much to say about this story as it was kind of whelming to me. Not great, not bad, but yeah, just kind of in that middle zone. I've read about 16 or 17 King books now, can't quite remember, and this will be at the bottom of the pile for me so far, as I have absolutely loved most of the things I've read by him. So the film just recently came out, and I've been talking about reading this book for a long time, so I thought it was really time to pick this book up. So this is a dystopian novel where we have 100 teenage boys who are signed up to the Long Walk. So this is a very gruesome TV reality show where these 100 boys are just walking, and that's all they're doing, but they're not allowed to stop or go below a certain speed. If they do, they get a warning, a second warning, a third warning, and if they are continuing to be slow or have stopped, they get shot dead by the military who are following them. And that's it. That's the story. One person will win, the last man standing, and we just watch the 99 others die from exhaustion or just giving up. Along the way, they kind of make friends with each other, which like adds a little bit of emotional impact to when we see the people die. And they also kind of make enemies with each other as well, as you could imagine, as tensions are fraying. But they're not allowed to like interact with each other physically. So I think where this book failed for me was that it was very on the nose. There's no subtlety in this book whatsoever. It felt just kind of like horror porn, but not horror in terms of like scary monsters. It was just horrific watching these people die one by one. The story was pretty predictable as well. And whilst I liked some of the characterization, although far from being King's best, it's hard to really care or become involved with them when you know that everybody will die. And like we have like a main focus character, so you pretty much know who is going to end up the winner. Thematically, we didn't really get much either. I love me a dystopian. This is one of my favorite sub-genres, but we got no context as to why this is happening or out of the outside world, outside of this walk. There are kind of fleeting mentions of why this is happening, and it was always exciting to hear commentary on the nature of reality TV and how soulless it can be. But we really didn't get that much, and I would have loved some more context as to the nature of this dystopia and why we are doing this. So yeah, it was okay. I'll probably forget it next week. I'm pretty much already forgetting it. It was a quick read, which was good, but not something to get excited about. I know a lot of people love this book, so perhaps I'm missing something. Let me know. I know there's some kind of connection to the Vietnam War, but if it's there, it feels very, very distant and not something that you can really pick up from reading it. You kind of have to be told it's about that for it to add any kind of meaning to that. So yeah, I'm blabbering now, so that was okay. The next book I read was The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. I was gifted this book by the wonderful Whitney over at Secret Source of Storycraft, and this is my 5th Asimov book and probably my favorite. I'm not quite sure yet. I need to think about that more. So this is a story in 3 parts. We have 3 sections in the book. Part 1, a crazy scientific discovery leads to the invention of something called the electron pump, which is a way of creating limitless energy through matter transferal with another universe. So very, high sci-fi concepts there. Not long after, following being shunned by the founder of the device, another scientist finds out that this tech could be incredibly dangerous to our life on Earth, but it is just completely ignored due to the greed and hubris of the scientific community. That's all I'll say about that part. Part 2, we go to the universe with which ours is connected with this electron pump and get a fascinating look into the alien society there. And there we explore similar themes of the hubris of people, or these aliens, in control of knowledge and power. This section has a fascinating ending, I'll say, but that's all I'll say about that section. Part 3, we go a little ahead of the time of part 1, so back on Earth, but this time in the setting of a lunar colony. And we learn much about this society and can continue the struggle of making people realize the dangers we face. And that's all I'll say about the plot. Now, the overarching theme is that of the corruption of fame and power, how these can lead to extreme bias and selfishness, even in the revelation of harm being done by these people and their discoveries. It was very well done, in my opinion, this exploration of theme, and feels pertinent to today, which is amazing considering it was written in the early 1970s. This is a story that is fairly flat in a way. Not a lot happens. It's definitely not plot focused, and we are kind of faced with many a scientist sitting in a room discussing what is going on and the problems that they're within. So if you're an action-based sci-fi reader, this is maybe not the one for you, but the conversations they are having are interesting in terms of both the scientific ideas and the political commentary that is being explored in this book. The middle section is an interesting take on aliens, and probably the strongest part of the book. I know a lot of people really love this section, and like I said, it has a killer ending. A part to note with this is that classic sci-fi often draws complaints of bad female writing, but here I was quite pleasantly surprised that we have two very strong and interesting main female characters, both in the second part and the third part. So if you're reading the first part and thinking, where are the females? They are coming, and they are actually very well done. So that is a wonderful surprise here, considering the writer and the time it was written. Now, this was a good book, a really interesting book. Not an old-timer for me, but it was very interesting and actually quite a quick read. So I will also say that unfortunately for me, the last section ends with a little bit of a whimper. I felt like something huge was going to happen, but it all just kind of got resolved in a very kind of calm manner, which, you know, does make sense. In reality, things don't always blow up and get really exciting, so maybe it's realistic, but I was left leaving wanting a little bit more in terms of excitement. But a really good book, and potentially my favorite Asimov so far. So finally, I will just talk about the university reads I've been doing. So I've been reading some poetry as per usual with the literature course that I'm doing. I've been reading some P.B. Shelley, Peanut Butter Shelley, some Keats and some Tennyson. Of those, Tennyson was my favorite. He has this kind of existential way of writing, which I quite enjoyed within his poetry. But I also read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This was my second read of this book. The first time I read it, I found it just kind of okay, a little bit too whiny maybe. But going into this knowing what I was going to be reading, I really didn't feel that way this time. And, you know, taking into consideration when it was written, I really, really enjoyed this book. And I found it to be quite dark and a really good exploration of guilt and othering and being different, as well as kind of consequences of scientific advancements and playing with nature, what that can do. It'll never be a favorite of mine, but it deserves its place in the pantheon of all literature, as well as being the grandmother of sci-fi. So that was a really fun read for me this time. Quite a quick read, actually. It's quite short. Yeah, it's a little bit dense at times if you're not used to this prose style, but having read it before, it was very easy to go through. And that's all I'll say. Frankenstein was great, obviously. And just a little coda to say that I read a few of Le Guin's short stories. I'm gradually making my way through the collection called The Wind's 12 Quarters. This is another sci-fi Masterworks one as well. I'm just slipping in a short story here and there when I have time, and I read 3 of them. Nothing was really impactful to me, to be honest, but 2 of them were set in the world of the Earthsea series, which I really enjoyed that series, so it was nice to go back there, and it was just extremely atmospheric in its writing. So those were a few short stories that I read this month as well. So now I will briefly go over my TBR for October. So obviously I have some university reads, more poetry and some more short stories now are creeping in, which I'm very grateful for. But at the moment I am reading for university The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. This is quite dense. It's 400 pages odd long, but the writing, like the print, is really small, and it is quite dense in terms of, you know, just reading this old school prose. But I am quite enjoying it. It's very Victorian and about, like, you know, the societies of the time and exploring all of the folly of these people in their kind of upper class world. And it obviously has quite a few, like, romance undertones or maybe even overtones. I'm not quite sure because I'm not really sure where the story is leading, which is exciting for me. So I am quite enjoying this, and we are definitely exploring kind of the role of the woman in this time as well, which is typical of the Bronte sisters. So quite enjoying that. I've got to read this very soon because my lecture on it is quite soon, so I've got to sit down and get to this quite quickly. So that'll be done within a few days. After that, I am definitely going to be picking up Memories of Ice by Stephen Erickson, the third book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Really enjoyed the first two books, so I'm really excited to get back to this. This is a massive book, and as we know, Malazan is not the quickest read, so this should take me at least a couple of weeks and maybe most of the month. A couple of quite heavy reads in a row there. After that, I have a book club meeting, the last one of the year actually, and we are reading Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. I'm really happy this got picked, as I've been talking about this book all bloody year. It is one of the Masterworks as well, so that's going to take another one off the list. And it is fitting for October because it is a vampire story, I believe. Now, I am not really a reader, like a seasonal reader. I don't read spooky reads in October or anything, but it's kind of nice that this got picked for my book club at the right time. So I'll definitely be reading that. The third and final book that I know I will definitely be reading is Nostrilia by Cordwainer Smith. This is going to be another buddy read with my friends Bart, Whitney and Richard and Dale, our friend. This is another sci-fi Masterworks book. They're being really kind and choosing these books for me because they know I've got this crazy task that I've set myself, so bless them for doing that. Honestly, I have absolutely no idea what this is about, but it's quite short and I hear it's quite interesting and weird, maybe even a little bit satirical. So very much looking forward to that. Now that seems to me like a lot of reading and probably enough to fill up my month. But if I have time to do anything else, I may read another SF Masterworks book, or I may read something like maybe a Banks book, but we'll have to see, and I'll probably do that by mood. So that is my TBR for October. So that is it for today's video. If you've made it this far, as always, I thank you so much. It really helps that you've watched the whole video. I want to apologize. I feel low on energy today. It's been quite a busy week and I've got a packed schedule over the next few days, so I really had to squeeze this in between stuff. So apologize, my energy has been low and I've been stumbling all over the place. I had to do quite a few retakes in this video, so thank you for your patience. Let me know if you've read any of these books and have any thoughts on them, both what I've read and the TBR. Let me know what you've been reading, have a conversation with me. I love chatting to people in the comments. I just want to note that my next video in a week's time is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be kind of a channel and life update. Some stuff's coming up that I have to let you know about, which will definitely affect the channel. So keep your eyes out for that. But that is it for today. If you like the channel, please press like. If you're new to the channel, please think about subscribing, and I will see you in another video soon. Goodbye.